Xiao Yi was reborn in Douqi Continent and became the only young master of the Xiao family. In order to ensure the safety of the Xiao family, he not only voluntarily terminated his engagement with Nalan Yanran, but also handed over the Tuoshe Ancient Emperor Jade to the ancient clan and sent away Gu Xun'er. However, a year later, Gu Xun'er inexplicably returned to the Xiao family, saying that he had only returned because he wanted him. I didn't help her warm and nourish her meridians when I was a child. It's strange. This book is an abstract and invincible genre, with a focus on a multiplayer Shura field, which may feel uncomfortable with rigorous logic. Chapter 1. The Mediocre and Weak Xiao Yi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xiao Yi, the Qi of Do, has 7 stages and is qualified. In the adult test of the new generation of family children in the Xiao family of Wutan City, Xiao Yi expressionlessly withdrew his hand from the test magic stone monument and returned to the crowd. Our young master's cultivation talent seems somewhat mediocre. He is only 15 years old and has a 7-dan fighting spirit. His cousin Xiao Mei, who is the same age as him, is already 8-dan. He is not only mediocre, but also a softie. I heard that the young master of Yunlan's sect was originally his fiancée A.E., whom he had arranged for him to marry. Unexpectedly, that guy felt that he was not worthy of him and came to his door to terminate his engagement. He can also be considered to have self-awareness. Rumors and gossip spread in his ears, and Xiao Yi only raised his eyebrows, showing a very speechless expression. He was reborn in the Douqi Continent and replaced Xiao Yan as the young master of the Xiao family. In order to protect the safety of the Xiao family, he not only voluntarily terminated his engagement with Nalan Yanran, but also handed over the Tuoshe Ancient Emperor Jade to the ancient clan and sent away Gu Xun'er. With such good intentions, he was actually ridiculed by others. It was truly speechless. Alright, the test is over. Now we will proceed to the next step of the adult test. Those who fail can challenge the qualified individuals. If the challenge is successful, they can stay in the family to continue their cultivation. On the high platform next to the testing ground, a middle-aged man dressed in a luxurious grey shirt stood up and loudly announced that Canran was quite dignified, with a pair of thick eyebrows adding a bit of pride to his face. He was the current leader of the Xiao family, also known as Xiao Yi's father, the 5-star fighting master, Xiao Zhan. With Xiao Zhan's announcement, those 6-dan Douqi people who were only one line away from passing the test immediately turned their gaze to Xiao Yi in the crowd. In the Xiao family, anyone who fails to reach the 7th level of Do Qi in adult testing will be judged as having no cultivation potential, and will be assigned to work in the family industry in another place, living a mediocre life. But there are exceptions, as Xiao Zhan announced. If you can defeat qualified opponents with unqualified cultivation, it is also enough to prove your talent, and you can continue to stay in the family to enjoy the resources of cultivation. Under normal circumstances, without special means, a person with a 6-dan fighting spirit cannot defeat an opponent with a 7-dan fighting spirit. However, as the saying goes, it is better to fight to the death than to sit idly by. Therefore, those who are only one line short of qualified will choose the mediocre and weak Xiao Yi as their goal of fighting to the death. Xiao Yi's cousin, I want to challenge you. Xiao Yi's cousin, please teach me. Watching the challengers swarming in, Xiao Yi let out a long sigh. These guys, who usually attack themselves behind their backs, are still using themselves as a breakthrough point. Is it really easy to bully them? Xiao Yi raised his eyebrows and fixed his gaze on a muscular challenger. He smiled and said, Cousin Xiao Ku, come first. Xiao Ku, a follower of the Xiao family's elder faction, was taken care of by Xiao Ning, the grandson of the elder, and mastered many of the Xiao family's superior fighting skills. He can be said to be a representative figure in the 6-section fighting Qi. As long as he is defeated, other challengers will naturally stop. Cousin Xiao Ku, please. The two of them walked onto the bluestone arena in the testing ground. Xiao Yi smiled and made a gesture of invitation. Xiao Ku's face froze and he said, Xiao Yi, cousin, be careful. He then gathered his fighting spirit, bullied himself, and struck with a palm. Split mountain palm. Huangjie intermediate fighting skill requires 5 levels of Douqi Qi to learn. In the Xiao family, which only has Xuanjie intermediate fighting skill at the highest level, it is already quite good fighting skills. The chopping palms that came towards him brought strong winds, but Xiao Yi did not dodge or avoid them. He also condensed his fighting energy and the chopping palms collided in mid-air. Xiao Ku trembled violently and flew backwards out of the arena. What kind of thing? Using the same fighting skills to defeat the enemy in one blow. What about the agreed mediocre softy? Xiao Ku was defeated, and the whole scene fell silent. Everyone looked at Xiao Yi, speaking silently. Even Xiao Zhan on the nearby high platform was lost in thought. When did my mediocre and spineless son become so powerful? Is there anyone else coming to challenge? Xiao Yi stepped forward with an easygoing smile, but none of the challengers who had rushed in before dared to respond. One by one, he retreated back, only to see a young man of 17 or 18 frowning at him from a distant observation platform. The grandson of the elder of the Xiao family, Xiao Ning. At night, the moon is like a silver plate, and the sky is filled with stars. In the mountains and forests behind the Xiao family, Xiao Yi woke up from several hours of cultivation, but his fighting spirit remained at the 7th stage, not rising at all. He raised his hand and looked at the antique black ring left by his mother between his fingers. He opened his mouth and finally couldn't help but say, "The guy in the ring, do you want me to stay in the Qi of Do for the rest of my life?" Black ring didn't react. Xiao Yi rolled his eyes and said, "Are you still pretending to be dead with me? I've tried to break through the fighter 10 times, but I've sucked it back for you. Are you starving ghosts already full?" Black ring still didn't react. Xiao Yi nodded angrily and said, okay. You can hold it so well, right? Then you can find another destined person to continue sucking it. After speaking, Xiao Yi took off the black ring from his hand and pretended to throw it towards the bottom of the cliff. At this moment, the familiar old figure finally appeared. "Kid, you really surprised me. Even though I was absorbing the Do Qi, I didn't expect you to break through to the Do Ren 10 times. Are you surprised? You shouldn't have asked me why I know everything first." Xiao Yi gave Yao Lao a strange glance and reached out his hand directly, saying, "You've also drawn in your fighting spirit. Show me the burning decision, and I can help you refine your body." Burning down. Refining the body. Really knows everything. Yao Lao looked at Xiao Yi solemnly for a long time before saying, "Kid, I have sucked on your 10. Your fighting energy, causing your cultivation to stagnate. Don't you hate me? Hate it." As he spoke, Xiao Yi only lifted his hand twice and continued, "So, give me the burning decision." Burning down. Yao Lao pondered for a moment and then asked, "Kid, if I hadn't been burned down, would you still be willing to let me suck on the fighting spirit for 10 years? Well. Upon hearing this, Xiao Yi withdrew his hand and smiled, "It all depends on my mood, after all, we are strangers." "You kid, you speak very openly." Yao Lao reached out and stroked his illusory beard, his figure flickered, and he crawled back into the black ring, leaving only an old voice. "From today on, I won't absorb your fighting energy casually anymore. The matter of burning will be discussed when you break through to the fighter again. Then you should think carefully. I'll practice first." After speaking, Xiao Yi breathed a long sigh of relief and put the simple black ring back on his finger. He then sat cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation again. Chapter 2. Emperor Sword Technique and Sonaire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day, the morning light of the rising sun slowly descended from the east, illuminating the endless mountains and forests behind the Xiao family, as well as the young man who had meditated cross-legged all night in the mountains and forests. "Doja, I'm here again." Xiao Yi woke up from his practice, slowly got up, raised his hand, and a condensed fighting spirit appeared in his palm. That's right, it's fighting spirit, not fighting spirit. In just one night, Xiao Yi broke through from the 7-Dan fighting spirit to the fighting spirit. Xiao Yi raised his hand and looked at the black ring between his fingers. He remembered what Yao Lao had said yesterday about the burning decision. When you broke through the Do Ren again, he couldn't help but laugh. Forget it, it's only so little time. The old man probably hasn't considered it yet. I'll try my own things first. Xiao Yi shook his head, and his hand, wearing a black ring, suddenly clenched into a sword finger. Then, the fighting spirit in his body surged wildly, and a phantom sword slowly condensed from his fingertips. Liuxi sword, this is Xiao Yi's favorite move in novels, after all, which boy can refuse a handsome and unparalleled sword immortal? Xiao Yi once read a martial arts technique called Emperor Sword Technique in a fairy tale novel, which can condense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into a sword. He was not handsome enough, so he came to the Douqi Continent and has been using the description of Emperor Sword Technique to condense Douqi into a sword. Until now, it has become somewhat popular. The Imperial Sword Technique condenses Qi into a sword, which can be divided into 5 realms based on the number of Qi condensing swords. Single Sword Realm, 10 Sword Realm, 100 Sword Realm, 1000 Sword Realm, and Endless Realm. It has 2 sword moves against the enemy, one is the split sword move and the other is the combined sword move. The Finjian style, as the name suggests, refers to using multiple Qi swords to surround and kill opponents. Corresponding to the realm of Emperor Sword Technique, it is divided into 5 types. Flying Sword Kill, 10 Surround Sword Kill, 100 Surround Sword Kill, 1000 Surround Sword Kill, and Endless Sword Kill. The combined sword style only has 2 moves. The one that breaks the sky and the one that penetrates the sky. The former condenses all the Qi sword edges to cut the opponent, while the latter condenses all the Qi sword tips to penetrate the opponent. Of course, the power of both depends on the realm of the Imperial Sword Technique. Flying Sword Kill. With a flick of Xiao Yi's sword finger, the Qi sword let go and howled out. After the sound of breaking through the air, a row of giant trees in front of him fell to the ground with a loud bang, and dust flew in the air. This thing is so powerful. The power is at least mystical. What a formidable fighting skill, brother Xiao Yi. The Xiao family's fighting skill hall doesn't seem to have such formidable fighting skills, does it? Just as Xiao Yi was secretly sighing, a slightly childish voice suddenly sounded in the forest ahead. He looked up and saw a young girl walking out with her hands down. The girl's temperament is extraordinary, like the first blooming of a clear lotus, just like Gu Xun'er who was sent away by him a year ago. Didn't you go back to the ancient tribe? Why did you come back again? Xiao Yi opened his eyes strangely, but Gu Xun'er playfully blinked. She walked forward, leaned forward slightly, and smiled, saying, "Because I missed brother Xiao Yi, I came back." You're toxic. Upon hearing these inexplicable words, Xiao Yi frowned and took a step back. He didn't help Gu Xun'er warm her meridians when she was young. So, where did he start thinking about you? The real ancient sheep may have died, but now the ancient sheep may be a spy of the Soul Clan. The Soul Clan can maintain the Douqi bloodline all the time because the void-swallowing flame has obtained the ability of the soul-swallowing clan. You must be careful, I have already told you all the important things. Xiao Yi looked at Gu Xun'er and said seriously, but the latter curled up her beautiful eyes and looked at him quietly. After a long time, she asked, "Does Xiao Yi really dislike Xun'er?" "Hate it." "I hate you for what?" Xiao Yi gave Gu Xun'er a strange glance and asked, "Oh, by the way, you have already revealed that the Tuoshe Ancient Emperor Jade of the Xiao family has been handed over to the ancient tribe, haven't you?" "It's leaking out." Gu Xun'er nodded and said, "After the Soul Clan finds out, it should be as Xiao Yi's brother thought, and they will not attack the Xiao family again." "That's good." Xiao Yi also nodded and said, then don't linger in the Xiao family, lest you accidentally be caught by the Soul clan. It won't be good to threaten your father to exchange the Tuoshe Ancient Emperor Jade. Seeing Xiao Yi's serious demeanor, Gu Xun'er suddenly gave a gentle smile. However, amidst that gentleness, there was a hint of inexplicable danger. With a smile, he said, "Brother Xiao Yi really cares about the Xiao family and the ancient tribe. As a descendant of the Xiao ethnic group, it's natural. I've been practicing all night, so I'll go back and rest first. If it's okay, you should go back to the ancient tribe. Good night." After speaking, Xiao Yi waved his hand and turned away from the mountains and forests. Gu Xun'er, who had always been elegant, looked at his back and furrowed her beautiful eyebrows, cursing an idiot out of her mouth. "How did you come back again?" "Curious and strange," he said. "He came back because he missed me. Can it be that guy Gu Yuan is trying to trick me into going to the ancient tribe to provide him with intelligence? Then just send someone to catch me directly." It's really strange. After returning to his residence and taking a shower, Xiao Yi lay in bed frowning, obviously puzzled by Gu Xun'er's confusing behavior of running back to the Xiao family. What's so strange about this? The little girl always likes to be with her crush. I said, "Why are you acting like a ghost?" Watching the sudden appearance of Yao Lao, Xiao Yi lowered his eyes in silence, but suddenly said, "What kind of sweetheart? Are you saying she likes me?" Yao Lao nodded jokingly, but Xiao Yi waved her small hand and said, "Absolutely impossible. I didn't go to flirt with her." Can the ancient clan's daughter still fall in love at first sight like a romantic brain? It's completely possible, but this ancient tribe's daughter is not in love with you at first sight, but has developed feelings for you over time. Yao Lao stroked his illusory beard, laughing silently. As he had not spoken in his heart, Gu Xun'er had indeed developed feelings for Xiao Yi over time, but Xiao Yi himself was unaware of it. Since Xiao Yi was reborn into the Xiao family, he would secretly run to the back mountain every night to study the imperial sword technique. On the way to the back mountain, he happened to be caught by the sleepless Gu Xun'er, so Gu Xun'er curiously followed him. In the following years, whenever Xiao Yi went to the back mountain to play the emperor's sword technique, Gu Xun'er would secretly follow him. The two bored people silently accompanied each other in this unique way, and an inexplicable affection slowly grew in the girl's heart. "Why are you laughing like an old six? You suddenly came out this morning and decided to pass on the burning formula to me." Looking at the disrespectful medicine elder in front of him, Xiao Yi also rarely discussed Gu Xun'er's matter with him again, directly turning the topic to the burning decision. After all, in the continent of Douqi, for an ordinary person to reach the peak, burning decision is the only known way. It's decided. Yao Lao's face suddenly froze and he looked at Xiao Yi. "Since you claim to be omniscient, you should also know how dangerous it is to cultivate burning Ju. In fact, there is something that I am quite puzzled about. With your cultivation talent, why should you take such risks? Do we still need reasons to pursue strength?" Xiao Yi shrugged his shoulders and suddenly had a rebellious expression in his eyes, saying, "In the world of the jungle, only by being at the peak can one indulge oneself. You're such a reckless person. Hee, little one, I've been hiding by your side for over a decade. I really didn't see that beneath your carefree appearance, you're so wild. But you're right, let's take another gamble." As Yao Lao waved his hand, a black scroll appeared out of thin air and slowly drifted towards Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi reached out to take it, took a long sigh of relief, and said to himself, "It's time to leave the Xiao family and go out and explore." Chapter 3. What to do before leaving the Xiao family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It was already the afternoon when Xiao Yi woke up. He opened his eyes and began to settle down. In just a short while, he successfully cultivated the burning decision. Indeed, it's a low-level yellow rank, so weak in fighting spirit. Looking at the faint fighting spirit in his palm, which was like a lingering candle, even though he had already known it in advance, Xiao Yi couldn't help but sigh and said to the black ring between his fingers, "Since you have passed on my burning decision, then you can also be considered my teacher." Teacher, before going out to search for the strange fire, may I have some more things to trouble you? What's up? Yao Lao's soul drifted out of the black ring, stroking his beard and asking. This may be a bit difficult for you as an alchemist. Xiao Yi froze for a moment and said, I would like to ask the teacher to give me the formulas for the foundation building spirit liquid and coagulation powder. I want to use these two things to make a deal with people. Do transactions with people. Upon hearing this, Yao Lao was taken aback for a moment. After a moment, he waved his hand and said, It's up to you. It's just 2 sets of low-level prescriptions that I casually made. However, kid, since you said you wanted to help me refine my body, in the future, besides cultivating fighting spirit, you'll also have to learn medicine refining techniques with me. Of course. Xiao Yi nodded, but suddenly said, I don't think 2 sets of prescriptions alone are enough to make my auction fully help the Xiao family. In a month's time, I still need to show some things in the family's adult etiquette. As the sun rises and the moon sets, a month passes by suddenly. On a sunny morning, Xiao Yi sits expressionlessly in the adult etiquette venue, nestled in a reclining chair, yawning incessantly. It's really difficult to adjust the difference at this time. Brother Xiao Yi stayed up all night again last night, didn't he? Looking at Xiao Yi's tired and lifeless face, Gu Xun'er beside him suddenly couldn't help but laugh. Xiao Yi nodded casually and scanned the large wooden platform temporarily built for adult etiquette in front of him. Then, he looked down at the crowd of people from various forces who came to observe the ceremony below the platform. Soon, he found the enchanting woman in a red dress that he remembered. The future Queen of Gold, Princess Yefei. Xiao Yi, what are you looking at? Just as Xiao Yi's gaze was fixed on concubine, Gu Xun'er beside her suddenly let out a low snort and asked with some meaningful meaning. I'm looking at Yefei from Maitel's auction house, Xiao Yi continued with a serious expression on his face and replied straightforwardly. Seeing this, Gu Xun'er narrowed her beautiful eyes and asked with a smile, Are you pretty? It looks pretty good, but I'm not sure if I can handle it. By the way, Xun'er, why haven't you returned to the ancient tribe? Xiao Yi looked curiously at Gu Xun'er, but saw the latter squint his autumn-like eyes deeper and still smile, saying, It's been a year since we last saw each other. It seems that Xiao Yi's brother's strength has increased a lot. After the adult etiquette, please don't refuse Xun'er's challenge. Isn't the challenge authority for adult etiquette below that of a fighter? Xiao Yi opened his mouth and hesitated to speak. Gu Xun'er only took out a book and quietly read it, never paying attention to him again. The soft sunshine shone on her body, making her warm and warm. From time to time, the fresh fragrance of a young girl could be heard from beside her. Xiao Yi kept her hands on her eyes, afraid that she might accidentally fall asleep. Next up, Xiao Yi. I don't know how long it took, but the host on stage finally called out his name. Xiao Yi also breathed a sigh of relief and was summoned to step onto the wooden platform. The host of adult etiquette is the second elder of the family, Xiao Ying. This second elder usually disdains Xiao Yi, but after defeating Xiao Ku with a single blow on that day, he has clearly made some changes in his attitude towards Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi's nephew, this ceremony is a bit complicated. Please be patient. Xiao Ying walked with a pile of messy materials, and Xiao Yi's eyes, which were already hard to open, collapsed even more. He simply closed them and took a nap. It wasn't until half a day later that Xiao Ying coughed low before opening them again. Retesting ceremony. After finishing a tedious passage, Xiao Ying shouted loudly and turned to the testing stone on the stage. He placed his slightly dry palm on it and injected a hint of fighting spirit into it. He looked at Xiao Yi and said, Xiao Yi's nephew, come and retest. Good Xiao Yi regained his energy for a moment, but glanced at the crowd watching the ceremony, intentionally or unintentionally glancing at Lady Ye who was inside. What is this little guy doing? Yefei furrowed her brows, her charming eyes slightly flowing, and a pair of seductive beautiful eyes curved along with them. What else can I do? I'm going to show you something. Xiao Yi turned around and casually placed his hand on the test stone. Suddenly, the light on the test stone shone brightly, and the dazzling golden light made everyone unable to look directly at it for a while. After a while, it slightly dimmed, revealing a line of big characters dancing like dragons and phoenixes. Doja, 9 stars. Silence, the whole place is silent. Shocked, the whole audience was shocked. Not only the onlookers present, but also the birds standing on the nearby branches were stunned. A gust of wind blew in the distance, as if speaking. 6. This is where it comes from. Those who practice the chi of the 7 Dan Do to the 9-star Do in January are just those who were born as Dozong. Xiao Yi raised his eyebrows and looked at Xiao Ying, who seemed to be petrified, saying, "Second elder, why don't you hurry up and announce the next stage?" Upon hearing Xiao Yi's reminder, Xiao Ying withdrew his hand from the measured stone and took a step back, whispering, "Xiao Yi's retesting ceremony has been completed. He will now take on a challenge with the authority below that of the fighter. Who of you is coming?" Xiao Ying announced that it was over, but the whole audience was in complete silence. With such a large 9-star fighter, you are still challenging below the authority of the fighter. Don't you come by yourself. Brother Xiao Yi, it's been a year since we last met. You're really becoming more and more attractive. At this moment, Gu Xun'er, who was sitting in the waiting area, suddenly put away the book in her hand and was about to get up when she saw a 17-year-old young man rushing out of the Xiao family's observing ceremony. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Xiao Ning rushed out of the crowd and waved his hand at the onlookers, saying, "What level is a 9-star Do fighter?" "It's a whole 12 levels difference from the chi of the 7-section Do. 12 levels. Even if Xiao Yi doesn't eat or sleep, he will have to practice for several years. How could he arrive in a month?" Upon hearing this, everyone suddenly woke up and began to discuss in a low voice. "Isn't this Xiao Yi just trying to show off and show off?" "That's right, for those who go from the 7th stage of Doji Chi to the 9th star Do in a month, why doesn't he take off?" "That's not right. His soft personality doesn't seem like someone who likes to show off, and last time he tested, he even used a move to instantly beat Shaw, who was only 1 level lower than him. He's not always pretending to be a soft egg, is he?" Listening to the rumors circulating around, Xiao Yi only glanced lightly. Anyway, he has also been used to discussions in recent years. It doesn't matter, but his heart is a bit tired. Xiao Yi was pushed to the forefront of the storm, but Xiao Ning took a big step onto the arena and proudly said, "Xiao Yi's cousin, if you really make any moves, you should admit defeat yourself, so as not to lose the face of the clan leader later. Big brother, you're almost 18 at least. Can you be more mature?" Seeing Xiao Ning's elementary school student's competitive demeanor, Xiao Yi remained speechless and said, "Cousin Xiao Ning, are you going to challenge me?" "Of course, cousin Xiao Yi, please." Xiao Ning made a gesture of invitation and just entered the battle mode when Xiao Yi appeared in front of him like a ghost, and then the person flew out of the arena. Another flash sale. Chapter 4. Princessia. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With the rapid defeat of Xiao Ning, the previous statement that Xiao Yi was testing his tricks was immediately debunked. However, as the saying goes, rumors are like annoying flies, killing one after another, so some people in the crowd started spreading rumors again. To defeat the enemy with one strike, it seems that Xiao Yi's test was not fake, but could he have taken some pill to enhance his strength in advance? Well, what you said is reasonable, brother. It's not very true that 1 month goes from the chi of the 7 Dan Do to the 9-star Do. I'm so tired, I'm only 15 years old. After hearing the rumors, Xiao Yi only looked up and let out a long sigh. He glanced at the charming concubine in the crowd again, raised his hand and made a gesture of appointment, before reluctantly returning to his recliner. Next up, Xiao Mei. As Xiao Ying, who was presiding over the ceremony, drank a drink. A young and beautiful girl quickly walked onto the wooden platform, and the attention of the crowd slowly shifted away from Xiao Yi, who had been deceiving others. The adult etiquette of the Xiao family continued, and as time passed, the sunlight falling from the sky became softer and softer. The drowsiness in Xiao Yi's mind also became stronger, and in the end, he closed his eyes and fell asleep on the spot. At this moment, Gu Xun'er, who was standing beside her, once again put away her book and turned her head to look at Xiao Yi. Her gaze suddenly softened like water about to flow out, and a tempting blush appeared on her pretty face. She murmured softly, "It's really getting better and better, brother Xiao Yi." Generally speaking, there are only two situations in which a person's time flies. One is when they are extremely addicted, and the other is when they are in a deep sleep. Feeling a hint of coolness caressing his body, Xiao Yi slowly opened his eyes and saw the Milky Way flowing, the moon hanging high in the sky, and the bright moonlight gently casting down, dyeing the distant mountains like jade. "Why did you fall asleep?" Xiao Yi patted his forehead and sat up abruptly from the couch. Looking around, he found that he was no longer in the adult etiquette venue, but inexplicably returned to the yard in front of his house. "Brother Xiao Yi is awake." A gentle voice followed, and Xiao Yi looked up. Under the bright moonlight, Gu Xun'er was smiling at herself next to the stone round table in front of her, while a mature woman in a red dress was also smiling at him. At the same time, there was also a chessboard between the two, with chess pieces intertwined on the board, as if they had already entered the middle ground. Gu Xun'er and Yefei are playing chess. This Xiao Yi stood up and walked to the stone table, his gaze fixed on the two women for a moment, then asked, "What is the situation now?" "What's the situation? Didn't you suggest that your sister came to find you?" Yefei lifted her slender chin and blinked at Xiao Yi. On the side, Gu Xun'er frowned without a trace and said with a smile, after the adult etiquette was over, "Sister Yefei said she wanted to find brother Xiao Yi for something, but brother Xiao Yi fell asleep on the couch like a pig and couldn't wake up no matter how he called. So Xun'er asked someone to carry you back to the yard, and Sister Yefei followed along until now." "That's it, thank you very much." Xiao Yi thanked Gu Xun'er and said, "Xun'er, I have something to say to Sister Yefei. It's getting late, so you should go back and rest first. I'll treat you to dinner later." Upon hearing this, Gu Xun'er tilted her head and suddenly narrowed her eyes into a somewhat dangerous curve. She smiled and said, "Is there anything important that brother Xiao Yi and sister Yefei have to say? Xun'er can't even listen to it on the side." Seeing Gu Xun'er's reaction, Lady Yefei's beautiful eyes moved and a hint of playfulness suddenly appeared on her face. However, Xiao Yi only waved her hand and said, "Actually, there's nothing important. If you want to listen, just listen." Speaking, Xiao Yi looked at Princess Yefei and said, "Sister Yefei, can I call you that?" "Sure." Yefei curled her red lips and nodded with a smile. Xiao Yi also smiled and said, "Yefei, do you think the potential I have shown now is worth your Mitel investment?" Upon hearing this, concubine Yefei's beautiful eyes froze and she said, "What does this mean, young Master Xiao?" Literal meaning. Xiao Yi smiled and said, "What does a 15-year-old 9-star fighter represent?" Sister Yefei should be clear in her heart, right? This is natural. Princess Yefei nodded. A 15-year-old 9-star fighter represents an infinite future. If Xiao Yi is truly a 9-star fighter, then the Xiao family may become a Dozong powerhouse in the future. What is the concept of a Dozong powerhouse in the Gamma Empire, where there is only the peak Dozong? That is an existence that crushes everything and is definitely worth Middle's investment. Xiao Yi's younger brother has really become a 9-star fighter. Princess Yefei carefully scrutinized Xiao Yi with a pair of seductive peach blossom eyes, her charming eyebrows still appearing somewhat incredulous. After all, in the rumors of Wutan City, the former was only in the 7th stage of Douqi a month ago. Forget it, Sister Yefei will take a closer look at the 9-star Do matter in the future. Seeing Lady Yafei's suspicious expression, Xiao Yi reached out and took out a piece of paper from her pocket, handing it to her and saying, "Sister Yafei, I have a big business here that I want to cooperate with you. Just help me get the materials on the list, and I will have a way to turn them into valuable elixirs." Oh. Yafei frowned, took the list and opened it, only to see a line of not-so-neat small characters written on it. 15 complete purple-leaved orchids, the higher the year requirement, the better. 10 bone-washing flowers, with arbitrary years, and 5 first-level magic cores in the wood series. Besides the 9-star fighter, is Xiao Yi's younger brother also a alchemist? After reading the list, Lady Yafei's eyes also froze with beauty. Although she was not an alchemist, her knowledge was extraordinary. In the Douqi Continent, who else could turn a bunch of unrelated medicinal herbs into spiritual medicines besides the alchemist? Perhaps so. Xiao Yi blinked mysteriously and said, "Does Sister Yafei want to verify it? Even if I'm a scammer, these materials are only a few thousand gold coins." Upon hearing this, concubine Yafei held her hands and looked at Xiao Yi. After a long time, she finally nodded and said, "All right, Sister would like to see how much you, a mischievous little guy, can do. I will send someone to deliver these materials in a few days. It's already late today, so Sister won't disturb you anymore." Speaking, Princess Yafei gave Xiao Yi a meaningful glance and then stood up and left. It seems that it's not that difficult to handle. After watching Princess Yafei leave, Xiao Yi also breathed a slight sigh of relief. Today's move has already aroused her interest. So, as long as we prove to her that we are truly worth investing in, the Xiao family should be able to receive Maitel's support. Well, let's leave it at that for today. Xiao Yi nodded to himself. Just as he was about to go back to the room and plan his next steps, he looked up and saw Gu Xun'er holding his cheeks and looking at him, with a somewhat meaningful expression on his face. Chapter 5. Liu Xi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Xiao family night market in Wutan City is a famous gathering place for couples. Xiao Yi looked expressionlessly at Gu Xun'er, who was eating elegantly in front of her, and said in silence, "I said I wanted to treat you to dinner, but why did you come to such a place to eat?" Gu Xun'er didn't answer, only glanced at Xiao Yi and continued to eat elegantly. However, amidst the red and green lights around, everyone looked at their table with strange eyes. Oh, these two people seem to have just reached adulthood. Are they coming to this kind of place? You see that kid's silly appearance, but he's quite handsome. That little girl is also very beautiful. Speaking of which, those two are quite compatible. I'll match you with a flame-dividing wave ruler. It's okay to be talked about at home, but when you go outside, you still have to be gossiped about. What are these things? Xiao Yi rolled his eyes in silence, but just as he picked up his chopsticks and was about to order some food, he accidentally caught a glimpse of the faint smile on Gu Xun'er's lips. She won't really. Xiao Yi frowned and carefully recalled his past. In the family, his communication with Gu Xun'er was basically similar to that of ordinary classmates. Curious and strange. Forget it, let's think about the next plan first. Putting Gu Xun'er's matter aside, Xiao Yi began to plan for the future. Please refine a few bottles of foundation building spirit liquid for Yafei, and after they see the efficacy of foundation building spirit liquid, use the specific prescription of foundation building spirit liquid to trade with them and ask them to take care of the Xiao family. Afterwards, we will invite a first-grade alchemist through Maitel to help the Xiao family refine clotting powder. Then he deceived the 8 extremes collapse from the medicine master and passed it on to the Xiao family after successfully practicing it himself. With this operation, there should be no problem going out and exploring on your own. But what about Liu Xi? He seems to have another teacher in the original work. I have a slight headache. Miss Beauty, can you tell me your name? Just as Xiao Yi was pondering, a young man in white suddenly appeared from somewhere, holding a rose in his mouth, and turned to the tables of the two of them to give Gu Xun'er a very coquettish gentlemanly salute. Xiao Yener. Gu Xun'er politely smiled at the young man in white and continued to eat elegantly. Looking at the slightly handsome face of the young man in white, she thought about breaking through the description in the original text. Xiao Yi's pupils flickered and he looked at the young man and said, "You're not Liu Xi, are you? Brother, you actually recognize me." The young man in white was taken aback by the words, and after a moment, he wiped his black hair back from his forehead and suddenly looked up and laughed, "Ha ha ha, it seems that the profession of alchemist is really popular. As soon as I entered the first level, my fame has already spread to every corner of the mainland. This willow mat, it's so strange." Looking at the Liu Xi in front of him, who had no hint of sleazy aura but a hint of sunshine, Xiao Yi's eyes twitched unconsciously and he fell into contemplation. After a moment, he looked up and asked, "Liu, big brother, what are you doing in Wutan City?" "Me." Upon hearing this, Liu Xi frowned and looked left and right. He brought a stool from beside him and sat down at the table, patting Xiao Yi's shoulder with a familiar expression. He said, "Young brother, since you are my fan, I'll tell you secretly. I was invited by the Jia family to discuss a cooperation. They want you to help refine the spring revival powder." Xiao Yi almost blurted out and said, "How did you know?" Liu Xi immediately circled in confusion. This Jiao Yejia is really not much better. Xiao Yi pondered for a moment, then looked up at Liu Xi with a fake commercial smile and said, "Brother Liu, I have a bigger business here than the Jia family. Are you interested?" "You." Upon hearing this, Liu Xi glanced up and down at Xiao Yi and said, "They offered me a condition of 19% to add the head of the family. He gave me 9 out of 10. What bigger business can you little brat, have?" It was done in Chengdu at 19 points, and in order to seize the market of the Xiao family, everything was done to the extreme. Upon hearing this, Xiao Yi snorted coldly, took out a scroll from his pocket, and threw it to Liu Xi, saying, "I only have a 50-50 split of the business here, but if you do well, there will be something better than money." "What's better than money?" Liu Xi opened the scroll and used his soul power to explore it. He only felt an extremely powerful soul power on it, which recorded a healing medicine prescription called coagulation powder. "Are you also an alchemist?" After perceiving the scroll, Liu Xi looked up in surprise. However, Xiao Yi only smiled mysteriously and said, "Take this prescription and go back to refine it. See how the refined product compares to your rejuvenation powder. If you are satisfied, come to the Xiao family to discuss cooperation with me." "So you're from the Xiao family?" Liu Xi looked at the prescription for coagulation powder and hesitated for a moment before finally nodding and saying, "Okay, I'll go back and try your prescription now. It seems that advanced prescriptions are quite tempting for alchemists." Looking at the hurried figure leaving, Xiao Yi only smiled and stroked his chin. At this moment, the black ring with the soul of Yao Lao in his hand trembled slightly. "Don't worry, teacher. It's just a pair of healing medicine. I sincerely stay in front of him. If he dares to make a fuss, I'll try the Emperor Sword technique with him." Xiao Yi lightly patted the black ring on his hand, but it trembled even more violently. At the same time, a very faint old voice rang in his ear. "Look at the little girl across from you." Xiao Yi was taken aback for a moment, looked up at Gu Xun'er sitting opposite her, and saw her with a snow-white chin propped up, smiling at herself. In her curved and beautiful eyes, there was a small golden flame flickering slightly, and she smiled and said, "Brother Xiao Yi, this meal doesn't count. You can treat me to another meal another day. This Gu Xun'er is like a ghost." Returning from the night market, Xiao Yi came to the mountains and forests behind the Xiao family with a puzzled expression, ready to start today's cultivation. "With your routine, I think you're still more like a ghost." From the black ring on his finger came the teasing voice of Yao Lao. Xiao Yi shrugged his shoulders without hesitation and said, "Teacher, I have already planned these days. You can teach me how to strengthen my body with the 8 extremes collapse first. After the Xiao family is settled, we will go to the Warcraft mountain range for practical combat and learn how to distinguish materials and refine medicine. After 6 months, we will return to enroll in the Canaan Academy, and then ask him to take a year off to go to the Tagore Desert to snatch the abnormal fire. Then we will go back to the Canaan Academy to deal with falling heart inflammation. What do you think? Is there a strange fire in the Tagore Desert? Upon hearing this, Yao Lao's soul drifted out of the black ring and frowned. Seeing that Yao Lao looked somewhat skeptical, Xiao Yi shrugged and said, if you have a bone spirit cold fire in your body, there should be a strange fire in the Tagore Desert. Chapter 6. First Medicine Refining. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. I said, did you old man suffocate your head in the ring? It's just my first day practicing the 8 extremities collapse, and when you come up, give me hundreds of fighting spirit lashes. You're going to take off, you. The next morning, Xiao Yi collapsed into the large wooden bucket of the bath, looking like he had been kicked to an egg. Countless green bruises covered his previously smooth skin. You kid, not only do you know everything, but you can also create advanced combat skills with power reaching the mysterious level. Your body is incredibly strong. Are you sure you're not an old monster who changed it, kid? You're just an old monster, the soul body of a cat in the ring every day still says others are monsters. Xiao Yi glanced at the black ring on his finger and pointed at the bruises on his body, saying, this one touch hurts. I won't be able to sleep well until later. What should I do now? Fighting qi and removing blood stasis. If you can fight qi and dispel blood stasis, I will let you be the medicine master of the old man. Yao Lao gave Xiao Yi a white glance in the ring and said, you can soak in more hot water these days. When your concubine Yefei brings the materials, I will refine the foundation building spirit liquid for you to heal your wounds. Upon hearing this, Xiao Yi said speechlessly, you old man, you know you don't have the materials to return it to me like this. Are you retaliating against me for giving away your prescription? 2 sets of prescriptions were just casually made, do I seem so stingy? With a cough, Yao Lao said, I just can't resist it. I want to see how much fighting spirit whip you can withstand, this kid. Your sister. I don't have a sister. At dusk, Xiao Yi slowly opened his eyes and lazily flipped over a few times on the bed, but he didn't feel any pain from the bruises on his body being squeezed, so he sat up fiercely. Where are the bruises on my body? Xiao Yi pulled up his clothes and saw that his skin, which was still unbearable yesterday, had become smooth and empty today. I haven't absorbed 3,000 flames yet. Xiao Yi sat on the bed in a daze, his face full of question marks, ready to fight against the silly bird. At that moment, the black ring on his finger suddenly trembled, and after a moment, the voice of Yao Lao hesitating to speak could be heard in his ear. Look at the bed cabinet next to you. Next to the bed cabinet. Xiao Yi looked at the bedside cabinet and saw a delicate small jade bottle quietly placed on top. At the bottom of the small jade bottle, there was also a pink note pressed down. What thing? Xiao Yi tilted his head, took a look at the jade bottle, and slowly typed the note under the bottle. There were 2 neat and beautiful small characters written on the note. Brother Xiao Yi, this is the 6th grade pill Tianxiang Yulu, specifically used to treat falls and injuries. Xun'er has already helped you wipe it off. Don't work so hard next time when practicing, Xun'er will be heartbroken. Boom. After reading the words on the note, Xiao Yi's mind suddenly made a thunderous buzzing sound. He looked at the black ring on his finger and asked in a sudden voice, Old teacher, you probably didn't use your fighting spirit to whip my lower body yesterday, did you? The atmosphere inside the room suddenly became a bit eerie. After a while, the old medicine doctor coughed and said, it seems like there isn't. A few days later, Lady Yefei finally sent someone to deliver the materials on the list. That night, Xiao Yi brought the materials to a hidden cave in the back mountain of the Xiao family, and began to watch the old medicine master refine a 2nd-grade pill to build a foundation. The bone spirit cold fire stirred slightly in his hand, and the purple-leafed orchid bone-washing flower bed was successively thrown into the flames and calcined into a liquid state. The old medicine practitioner used fire as a cauldron and played very well. As the final first-level magic core of the wood series was refined, the 3 medicinal herbs gradually approached in the cold fire of the ancient spirit, and finally fused into a drop of jade-like liquid. Foundation building liquid, freshly baked. Teacher, I also want to play. After watching the seemingly flavorful process of refining medicine, Xiao Yi immediately rolled up his sleeves and showed an eager look. However, the old medicine man frowned and said, "There isn't even a tripod, how are you playing? And this foundation-building spirit liquid is a second-grade pill." Seeing Yao Lao's rigid appearance, Xiao Yi waved his hand and said, "Oh my, it's just that there's no cauldron, it's just a second-grade pill. You all say I'm like an old monster, why don't you let me try it? At most, I'll just pay a few low-level materials. Do you want to learn from me to use fire as a cauldron when refining medicine for the first time? Do you know that you can only summon void now?" Before Yao Lao could utter the last word of fire, Xiao Yi flipped his hand and summoned a pale yellow flame of fighting spirit, then injected a trace of wooden power into the flames. "You kid, it's better for me to be normal." Yao Lao hesitated and opened his mouth, but Xiao Yi ignored his strange appearance. He took a cold breath and threw 3 purple-leaved orchids into the fire, calcining them in an orderly manner. How could you not have burned the medicinal herbs? At this moment, the medicine elder beside him finally couldn't hold his tension and spoke with a surprised expression, "It's okay to make the real fire summoned by the 4th-grade alchemist. Anyway, your child is already very strange. How did you know the temperature adaptation point of this purple leaf orchid grass? You know it's already outrageous to this extent. Didn't you practice it in front of me just now?" Xiao Yi replied slightly, continuing to concentrate and control the fire of Douqi to calcine medicinal herbs, regardless of the medicine elder who had completely collapsed in the nearby medicine refining temple. "Do you know how to adapt to the temperature by looking at it once? Why don't you take a look and calcine it over high heat to directly refine the medicine?" The fire of Douqi had been burning for an hour, and the 3 purple-leaved orchids in the flames were finally refined into liquid form. However, Xiao Yi suddenly withdrew from the flames, wrapped the liquid in Douqi, and pushed it to the medicine master, saying, "Teacher, I feel a bit weak. This undeveloped burning decision is really too slow. You come and continue refining. Hey guy, you're the one who came out to show off, right?" Yao Lao silently took the liquid from purple leaf orchid grass and sensed it with his soul. He found that the calcination was not a problem. The old man frowned and thought to himself, "This kid is probably a transformation of an old monster." It was another night of ghostly routine, and the next afternoon, Xiao Yi didn't procrastinate and went directly to the Mitel auction house with the refined foundation-building spirit liquid. "Master Gu Xun'er has already identified it, and your foundation-building spirit liquid has reached 2nd grade. The claimed efficacy should also be true." Yifei came out of the treasure appraisal room with the foundation-building spirit liquid. She looked at Xiao Yi with seductive beautiful eyes and asked with great interest, "Xiao Yi's younger brother, how did you transform these foundation-building spirit liquids?" "Secret." Xiao Yi blinked mysteriously and said, "Do you want the specific prescription for this foundation-building spirit liquid, Sister Yifei?" What does Xiao Yi's younger brother mean by this? Upon hearing the words, the slender and beautiful eyes of concubine Yifei narrowed, but Xiao Yi smiled and said, "A 15-year-old 9-star doe can easily turn out 2nd-grade pills. So, the Xiao family should be worthy of special care from your Mitel, right?" Looking at the misty young man in front of her, Lady Yifei's seductive thin lips slightly parted and smiled, "Xiao Yi's younger brother wants us to take special care of the Xiao family." Xiao Yi's face froze and he said, "In the competition among the 3 major families in Yuten City, I want you Mitel to stand with the Xiao family." Upon hearing Xiao Yi's words, concubine Ya's pretty face changed slightly and she said somewhat awkwardly, "Xiao Yi's younger brother, our might has a rule that we cannot participate in any inter-family activities. Give me the materials." In addition to the specific formula of the foundation building spirit liquid, I can also provide you with 2 more gathering chi powder. Gathering chi powder. That's a pill that can only be refined by a 4th grade alchemist. A single one is worth tens of thousands of gold coins, and the so-called 4th grade alchemist is even rarer in the Gamma Empire. If the Xiao family really has the ability to transform into chi gathering powder, then the absolute value is worth special treatment by Mitel. Upon hearing this, concubine Yafei's beautiful eyes tightened. However, with the composure she had developed over the years in the mall, she forcibly calmed down and said, "Brother Xiao Yi, this is not a matter of pills and prescriptions. Since Sister Yafei thinks that such a Xiao family is not worth investing in, then I'll leave." Wait a minute. Just as Xiao Yi was about to leave, concubine Yafei suddenly bit her thin lips and called out to him, "We Mitel can try to support the Xiao family in secret, but we cannot stand in line openly. Try your best, secretly this woman is indeed as cunning as in the original work." "That's okay too." Upon hearing this, Xiao Yi sat back in his seat and looked at concubine Ya, saying, "Since we are trying to be as close as possible to the dark, I will add some more conditions. Sister Ya will give me another low-level ring, 500 clotting herbs, 500 poppy flowers, and 500 vitality fruits. How about that? A low-level ring, with thousands of materials, these things add up to at least 100,000 gold coins." Upon hearing Xiao Yi's additional conditions, concubine Ye couldn't help but feel a tightness in her heart and asked, "Xiao Yi's younger brother, can you really transform into a gathering chi dispersion?" Upon hearing this, Xiao Yi only smiled and took a scroll from his pocket. He waved it in front of concubine Ya and said, "Even if I can't transform it into Douqi powder, in terms of gold coin conversion, this prescription of foundation building spirit liquid is enough for you to make a big profit, right?" Chapter 7. Construction of Liuxi. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. An hour later, Xiao Yi came out of the Mitel auction house and turned the low-grade Na ring in his hand, muttering to himself, "This woman is really delicate. She even gave me a bunch of medicinal bottles, and I didn't even consider it at the time." Speaking, Xiao Yi put the ring into his pocket and leisurely hummed a tune. Next, as long as Yao Lao refines Douqi powder and Mitel takes care of the Xiao family, it should be basically finalized. As long as Liu Xi doesn't cause any trouble, he can go to the Warcraft Mountain to cultivate with peace of mind. As he walked out of the Mitel auction house, Xiao Yi suddenly stopped and looked up at the girl sitting in the shared seat ahead. He instinctively took a step back and said, "Sun, what are you doing here?" Gu Xun'er didn't answer, using only her slender fingers to gently curl her drooping green hair. Her autumn-like eyes were somewhat dangerous as she stared at Xiao Yi. "Dao, brother Xiao Yi looks very happy. Is she already the boyfriend of Princess Yafei? What are you speaking against the heavens?" Upon hearing Gu Xun'er's words, Xiao Yi only supported his forehead and said, "What boyfriend? I'm here to talk to Sister Yafei about business. We've been living together for so many years. Do you think I'm an unscrupulous person who goes to flirt with her whenever I have nothing to do?" "That's true. Brother Xiao Yi has indeed been very serious these years." With a non-committal smile, Gu Xun'er suddenly stood up and took Xiao Yi's arm, saying, "Brother Xiao Yi should be hungry after discussing business for a long time. Let's go and have some food together." Why did she do this? I don't understand. It was the same place as the last lovers' rendezvous, and looking at the gentle and seductive Gu Xun sitting next to her, Xiao Yi couldn't help but wonder. Hey! What a coincidence! I was just about to go to the Xiao family to find you, but I didn't expect to run into you again here. After a sunny and cheerful voice, Xiao Yi turned his head and saw Liu Xi bring another chair closer. His handsome face showed a hint of eagerness and he said, "Brother, your coagulation powder is really good. Not only is the material cost lower than mine, but the effect is also better than mine. I've decided to work with you. Did you decide now?" Looking at the hasty Liu Xi, Xiao Yi was also somewhat flattered. However, the former reached out and rested his hand on his shoulder, with a look of familiarity with him, saying, "Of course I'll do it with you just because of our relationship." Speaking, Liu Xi suddenly lowered his voice a bit and approached Xiao Yi, saying, "As you said before, if I do well, there will be something better for me than money. For us alchemists, there are only advanced prescriptions that are better than money. Why are you such a shrewd guy?" Xiao Yi looked up and down at Liu Xi and said, "All right, I'll discuss with my father when I go back and hire you as the chief alchemist of our Xiao family. The materials will be provided by my family, and the drug income will be divided into 5 to 5 parts. How about taking the food and keeping it?" "Deal." Liu Xi agreed in one fell swoop and suddenly frowned, as if thinking of something. He looked at Xiao Yi and said, "Go back and discuss with your father. Are you the genius young master of the Xiao family who has been practicing from the 7-stage Douqi to the 9-star Do in just 1 month, Xiao Yi? Young man, your intelligence and emotional intelligence have a bright future ahead of you." Xiao Yi shrugged and said, "It's just me, so you need to work hard. As long as you are sincere enough towards the Xiao family, your benefits will be indispensable in the future." Upon hearing this, Liu Xi straightened up and raised his hand, pointing up the back 3 fingers, saying, "Okay, brother Xiao, I will do my best to help the Xiao family." A few days later, after a tedious process, the sunny and cheerful version of Liu Xi successfully became the chief alchemist of the Xiao family. Xiao Yi gave him the medicinal materials of the coagulation powder he had obtained from Concubinea, and the former was also fully motivated to start work. It's night, behind the Xiao family mountain. Xiao Yi sat quietly on the top of the cliff, his legs swaying in the air. Looking at the light swirling Milky Way, a sad expression suddenly appeared on his face. Perhaps this is the so-called sorrow of separation. Although his feelings for the Xiao family are not so profound, at least he stayed there for 15 years. "Teacher, do you think I can evolve Fenju into the top martial arts technique on the continent?" Recalling the painful process of Xiao Yan devouring the strange fire in the original work, even Xiao Yi, who was wild in his heart, couldn't help but feel a little unconfident. Upon hearing this, the illusory Yao Lao smiled and said, "You little monster, are you still afraid? However, it is true that the strange fire is the most violent thing in this world. Even when I was there, it almost burned me to ashes. Ashes are just ashes." Xiao Yi suddenly stretched lazily and said with a smile, "It's better to be burned to ashes by a strange fire than to be powerless in anything. Teacher, prepare and let's set off." "Are you really saying, just leave, and not saying goodbye to your family?" "No, I hate the tug of farewell the most. I have left a letter to my father, telling him that I will be back at most 6 months. Xiao Yi waved his hand gracefully, but Yao Lao smiled and suddenly joked, "What about the young lady from the ancient tribe? Don't you tell her?" "She." Speaking of Gu Xun'er, Xiao Yi only sighed and said, "I don't know how to tell her, why don't I just say it?" "You already know her feelings for you, right? Teacher, have you ever heard of the story of the cowherd and weaver girl? In that story, there was a weaver girl who was as noble as Xun'er and fell in love with a destitute cowherd. Despite poverty, the weaver girl bravely walked with the cowherd, but in the end, they were forcibly separated and went their separate ways." As Xiao Yi spoke, he slowly stood up and looked down at the vast expanse of human mountains and rivers under the starry river. Suddenly, his expression froze and he continued, "If I were the cowherd, I would rather leave the weaver girl in despair from the beginning before I had enough ability, than walk to the tragic and lamentable end." "You kid, you're really interesting." Yao Lao shook his head and smiled. His gaze couldn't help but glance towards the dense forest behind the cliff. In the dim shade of the trees, there was a graceful figure silently gazing at the young man on the cliff. A delicate and pretty face turned seductive crimson. To the west of Wutan City lies the thousands of miles of the Warcraft Mountains. At the corner of the mountain range, there is a small town called Qingshan Town. In the original work, there lives a girl who is difficult for Xiao Yi to calm down. Little Doctor Immortal. After some inquiry, Xiao Yi went to the shop that sold Huanlian essence and found the necessary blood lotus essence to refine the blood lotus pill. Chapter 8. No Little Doctor Immortal or Blood Lotus Spirit. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The 8 Extremes Collapse. A solitary moon hung high in the sky, and in the pitch-black grove under the moon, Xiao Yi punched a giant tree next to him. With a loud roar, the tree, along with several giant trees behind it, exploded in an instant. You kid, how can you penetrate the chi of the 8 Extremes Collapse? The Yao Lao in the ring raised his eyebrows and looked surprised, but Xiao Yi ignored him and sat silently on a fallen tree trunk. He sighed to himself, it's okay if there's no Little Doctor Immortal. Why don't you even have the Blood Lotus Spirit? You're too immature in Qingshan Town. Seeing Xiao Yi's somewhat dejected expression, Yao Lao put aside his surprised expression and said somewhat teasingly, why, did you encounter something unexpected? Yes. Xiao Yi took a breath, but suddenly lifted his head as if he had instantly understood, and said, but it's also true. After all, Liu Xi's character has changed, and it's not a problem for Qingshan Town to change. However, we still need to go and see the place where the flying skills are. As he spoke, Xiao Yi stood up and took out a newly purchased map from his ring. He looked at the only cliff on it and said, let's go, teacher. I'll take you to a good place. Half an hour later, Xiao Yi arrived at the cliff on the map and looked over. However, he saw 7 or 8 big men surrounding a young girl who seemed to have just reached adulthood on the cliff ahead. As the 7 or 8 big men approached, the girl retreated 1 point towards the edge of the cliff. He, Linger sister, you can leave uncle today. Uncle will bring you a heavenly experience. Among the 7 or 8 big men, there was a skinny man who licked his tongue lewdly and then approached the girl 1 step closer. The girl's innocent little face turned pale in fear, and she took a step back towards the edge of the cliff, saying, don't come over. My Uncle Yen is a star fighter, and if you do those things to me, he will kill you. Your Uncle Yen. Upon hearing this, the skinny man only sneered and said, your Uncle Yen robbed the treasure of our wolf-head mercenary corps. Our regimental leader hasn't even reconciled with him yet. You're talking nonsense. The girl angrily opened her watery eyes and said, the treasure under the cliff was originally discovered by our blood battle mercenary corps first. What's the use of discovering first? As he spoke, the skinny man licked his tongue and looked at the young girl's newly developed chest, saying, Sister Ling, the leader of our wolf-head mercenary corps, Mu Shi, is a 2-star fighter. You don't want him to trouble Uncle Yen, do you? As long as you obey Uncle today, Uncle can go back and persuade the team leader to let him forget about your treasure robbery. Upon hearing the words of the skinny man, the girl only let out a yelp and continued to retreat towards the cliff. At this moment, a big man beside the skinny man frowned and reminded, Second Captain, aren't we going to catch this girl and force the blood battle mercenary corps to hand over the treasure? Isn't this not good for you? Shut up. The skinny man patted the big man and sneered, what do you know? Yen Qing from the blood battle mercenary corps robbed our treasure. Even if he returned it, it would still be second hand. I have to turn his niece into second hand, that's fair. What kind of statement is this that shatters the 3 views hiding aside? Xiao Yi looked up at the sky and took a long breath, saying, Teacher, I think I need to take action, otherwise it will be either a cliff-jumping tragedy or 404 later. Yo, as soon as this one comes out, heroes will save the beauty, right? In the midst of the black ring, Yao Lao chuckled jokingly and said, those 8 people, 1 9-star do, 3 5-star do, and 4 2-star do, you have to be careful if you want to take action. Emperor Sword Technique, Flying Sword Kill. Without waiting for Yao Lao to remind him, Xiao Yi grabbed his sword finger and dodged to kill. Along with him, there was a raging sword that roared everywhere. Upon hearing the sudden roar of swords, the 8 big men surrounding the young girls on the cliff suddenly changed their faces and immediately activated their fighting spirit. The skinny man, who seemed to be a 9-star fighter, had just turned towards Xiao Yi. With a, "Who is it?" and only one mouth open, he was pierced by a raging chi sword and splattered with blood on the spot. "They are all 9-star fighters, are you a bit too watery?" After killing the skinny man, Xiao Yi pointed his fierce chi sword at the other 7 men and said in a cold voice, "Go away, don't ask who I am. My name is Black Knight Hero, and I'm not afraid of offending your wolf-head mercenary corps." 7 big men coincidentally looked at Xiao Yi, and then coincidentally looked at the second commander who died suddenly on the ground. They all swallowed their saliva, immediately picked up a burst of smoke and dust, and fled. "You're running really fast. Little sister, are you okay?" After the remaining few big men ran away, Xiao Yi reached out to the girl named Linger sister by the skinny man, showing an easy-going smile. However, the girl rolled her eyes and suddenly fainted. "What the hell?" Xiao Yi quickly stepped forward to help the young girl. At this moment, the voice of the old medicine man slowly rang out in the black ring. She was frightened too much and temporarily fainted. You can start a campfire in another place to warm her up. So Xiao Yi picked up the girl horizontally and glanced at the lean man's body on the ground. It seemed that he didn't have any good equipment, so he turned around and left. "You kid, where did you get so skilled in killing people?" In a secluded place in the forest, Xiao Yi casually lit the campfire with his fighting spirit and flames. The medicine elder in the black ring finally couldn't hold his breath and asked, "The power of your emperor striking sword technique just now may have reached the level of ground combat skills. I'm really curious where you learned this move." "I read it in a book." Xiao Yi shrugged calmly and continued to light the bonfire, but he was calculating in his heart that a flying sword kill with 8 chi swords in one could directly attack the ground-level combat skill. So when I condense 10 chi swords and use the combined sword-style sky-breaking sword, its power should be comparable to the ground-level combat skill, right? "You're such a monster, kid." Upon hearing Xiao Yi's somewhat perfunctory answer, Yao Lao rolled his eyes and said, "I used to worry about you breaking through the realm and losing your fighting spirit one after another. Now it seems like you're overthinking it. It's just average." Xiao Yi smiled humbly and looked at the unconscious girl. If she hadn't heard it wrong, she seemed to have said earlier that the treasure under the cliff had been taken by the Blood Battle Mercenary Corps, so this matter would be a bit difficult to handle in the original work. The flying combat skills obtained from the cliff are indispensable in the early stage, and it is necessary to obtain them when pretending to be forced to run. However, the Blood Battle Mercenary Corps is still a relatively decent group and cannot be forcibly robbed. Difficult to handle, where is this? Just as Xiao Yi was having a headache, the unconscious girl on the side slowly woke up and looked at him, but quickly withdrew. Chapter 9. Blood Battle Mercenary Regiment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wake up. Looking at the young girl who seemed to still have lingering palpitations, Xiao Yi took out a wild fruit from the ring and threw it over, saying, "Eat a fruit to suppress the shock." That second captain is really quite abnormal. Remembering the sleazy behavior and rebellious remarks of that skinny man before, Xiao Yi's gaze suddenly showed a hint of sympathy. What a shadow should it leave in the heart of a young adult girl. "I'm not hungry." The girl took the wild fruit, but put it aside, and the atmosphere became somewhat awkward for a moment. "Okay." Xiao Yi shrugged nonchalantly and took out a wild fruit from his ring, nibbling on it himself. "I heard that second captain called you Linger before, so I'll call you Ling Miss," he said as he spoke. Xiao Yi looked at Ling Er and said, "Miss Ling, what was the second regiment leader saying before that your Blood Battle Mercenary Regiment had obtained the treasure below the cliff? Is there a few scrolls of fighting skills in that treasure? What do you want?" Upon hearing Xiao Yi inquire about the treasure, Ling Er's slightly mischievous little face immediately froze and became very alert. "I want the flying skills inside." Xiao Yi said in his heart and looked at Ling Er, saying seriously, Ling Miss, you don't want your bloody mercenary group to be troubled by the wolf-headed mercenary group, do you? What do you want? As soon as this familiar sentence pattern was formed, Ling Er immediately embraced her chest with her hand, and the alert expression in her eyes instantly changed from 10,000 to 10,000. Looking at the flat airport of the young girl, Xiao Yi suddenly said speechlessly, what I mean is, I can help you solve the problem of the wolf-head mercenary corps, but you need to share the fighting skills you have gained from this cliff with me. Upon hearing this, Ling Er's wary expression in her eyes slightly subsided. She glanced up and down at Xiao Yi and cautiously asked, are you really willing to help us? Are you trying to trick me into leading the way and then kill someone to steal a treasure? Xiao Yi. After a lot of communication, Xiao Yi finally convinced Ling Er, who seemed to be confused, and the two of them set off for the Blood Battle Mercenary Corps. Why did you come back so late, girl? Didn't you run out of the mercenary army's territory and go wild again? Didn't you tell me not to run around recently? As soon as the two arrived at the entrance of the Blood Battle Mercenary Corps, a middle-aged man with a mercenary badge rushed over. Hey, who is this little brother? The middle-aged man walked forward and glared at Ling Er before realizing that there was also a very unfamiliar young man who came back with her. He came to talk to Uncle Er about cooperation, and I didn't run out of the mercenary group's territory. Ling Er paused for a moment, feeling a bit guilty and said. Collaboration. The middle-aged man, however, did not notice Ling Er's guilty heart. He only looked at Xiao Yi and thought to himself, what kind of cooperation can this young man, who is not even fully developed, talk to his team leader about? However, he still reached out his hand and introduced himself with a smile, hello little brother, my name is Kagang. My name is Black Knight. Xiao Yi politely stepped forward to shake hands with the middle-aged man, but his gaze glanced at Ling Er next to him. He thought to himself that the little girl was really amazing. In order to avoid being punished by her parents, she didn't even intend to say anything about her almost being punished. Since you're here to discuss cooperation, let's go see the team leader with me. Good. After Jian got to know each other, Ka Gang led Xiao Yi towards the direction of the mercenary army. Looking at their backs, Ling Er frowned and took steps to follow them. In the hall of the Blood Battle Mercenary Corps, an older-looking middle-aged man was sitting in his seat, frowning and looking at the three tightly closed combat scrolls on the table in front of him, with a worried expression on his face. Captain Kagang has brought guests to see you. As the servant reported, the middle-aged man quickly put the scroll into the ring and put away his worried expression, saying, call them in. Yes. The servant who reported retreated, and after a moment, Ka Gang brought Xiao Yi to the hall, followed by a girl who appeared somewhat guilty. What are you doing in the council hall instead of taking a shower and sleeping, girl? Looking at Ling Er who was following, Ka Gang frowned in confusion. Xiao Yi beside him shook his head and explained for her, I came to your bloody mercenary group at night. Ling Miss is probably afraid that I have ulterior motives and don't trust her, so she came with me. After all, she brought me here. Upon hearing this, Ling Er looked at Xiao Yi with a look that was still recognizable to you. However, Ka Gang rolled his big eyes beside him, thinking to himself, even if someone wanted to have ulterior motives, what could you, a little girl, do with her? Are you taking someone hostage? Captain, this little brother's name is Hai and he said he came to talk to you about cooperation. Collaboration. After listening to Ka Gang's introduction, the middle-aged man sitting in the seat frowned and thought to himself, what kind of cooperation can this kid, who is not even fully developed, talk to me about? However, he still introduced himself with a smile and said, my name is Yen Cheng, and I am the commander of this bloody mercenary regiment. I wonder what kind of cooperation you want to talk to me about, little brother. Talking about the cooperation of the Wolf-Head Mercenary Corps in robbing treasures. As Xiao Yi spoke, he flicked his chi sword and made a shocking deep mark on the hard ground. He smiled and said, Captain Yen, there should be a flying combat skill called Eagle Wings among the treasures you have obtained. I think it will be difficult for you to cultivate that thing. Give it to me and I will help you smooth out the moose snake. In the original work, the soul of the fifth order flying demon beast black flame purple cloud carving lies dormant inside the eagle wings. Without strong soul power to suppress it, those who have practiced it recklessly will be backfired. Upon hearing this, Yan Cheng's face froze and he glanced at Xiao Yi. He said to Ka Gang next to him, "You and Ling Er should go down first. I want to have a good conversation with this little brother from the Dark Night." "Yes, Captain." Ka Gang nodded and picked up Ling Er, who seemed unwilling to leave, before leaving. After the two of them left, Yan Qingkai let out a deep cry and said, "Little brother, I have indeed obtained a roll of flying combat skills, but it is not eagle wings, but fire cloud wings." Fire cloud wing. Has the original setting broken again? Upon hearing this, Xiao Yi frowned and Yan Cheng continued, "Little brother, to be honest, among the treasures I have obtained, besides the fire cloud wing, there are also 2 other volumes of fighting skills. However, these 3 volumes of fighting skills are all sealed by a powerful force. Even if I give them to you, you may not be able to open them. Do you talk to me about sealing as the protagonist?" Xiao Yi only smiled inwardly, but on the surface, he was very calm and said, "If Captain Yan has the intention to cooperate, just give me Huiyini. I have my own way to seal it." Seeing Xiao Yi's confident demeanor, Yan Cheng pondered for a moment and remembered his previous condensed breath sword. He smiled and said, "Brother Black Knight, you want Huiyin Wing. But besides helping to deal with Moose Snake, you also need to exchange a Xuanjia level combat skill with me and guide me to learn that combat skill." Chapter 10. Meetings. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Good guy, you have to be a thug, deliver combat skills, and become a coach. You know how to do business. Upon hearing Yan Cheng's conditions, Xiao Yi only rolled his eyes inwardly and nodded with a smile, saying, "All right, besides dealing with Moose Snake, I can give you another volume of Xian-level fighting skills and guide you in cultivation. However, all 3 volumes of fighting skills that cannot be opened must belong to me." "Okay. Deal." Upon hearing this, Yan Qingmeng immediately agreed and exchanged 3 volumes of martial arts that could only be seen for 1 volume of actual Xuanjia martial arts. He also provided guidance and added thugs, earning blood. "Okay, deal." Xiao Yi also stepped forward and fiercely slapped the case, agreeing immediately. Isn't it just a gift of Xian-level combat skills, and also serving as a guide and hitter? The 3-volume combat skills in the hands of this unscrupulous merchant would definitely earn blood. After all, the combat skills that can be sealed by powerful forces are fake goods. So the 2 of them hit it off at once, drinking and having fun, and finally resting. I truly deserve to be the team leader, or can I really drink it? The next day, Xiao Yi woke up from a hangover and kept patting his still slightly drowsy head. It was obvious that he and Yan Cheng had been knocked down for a drink yesterday. "You're really big-hearted. You can still drink like this when you go out." In the black ring on his finger, Yao Lao said angrily, but Xiao Yi shrugged nonchalantly and said, "Drinking alcohol can show the sincerity of both parties. Besides, I'm drunk, and there's also you, teacher. If there's any animosity among those petty fighters, why don't you just raise your hand and clean up? I am your teacher, not a bodyguard." Yao Lao rolled his eyes in the black ring and said, "After you said you wanted to give him a Xuanjia fighting technique, are you trying to deceive me again?" "Don't deceive." Xiao Yi waved his hand and said, "I plan to directly collapse the 8 extremes to him." "What?" Upon hearing this, the medicine elder in the black ring almost burst out and said with a hint of anger, "Kid, that's how you use your fighting skills. Why don't you give him your Emperor Sword technique?" Xiao Yi glanced at Black Ring and said in a low voice, "My Emperor Sword technique is useful." In the end, Yao Lao finally compromised. After all, the 8-pull collapse was not a powerful fighting skill, and it was still very cost-effective to switch to 3-volume fighting skills including flying fighting skills. After tacitly agreeing to the collapse of Xiao Yi and Huoba Ji, Yao Lao asked, "But how do you plan to deal with Moose Snake? You also overheard last night that he is a 2-star fighter." Xiao Yi was taken aback by the words and said, "Do I have any plans to deal with a 2-star fighter?" "Teacher, didn't you also drink yesterday?" Pharmacist. Did you say that Ganmu was instantly taken off guard? In the conference hall of the Wolf-Head Mercenary Corps, Mu Shi was shocked and couldn't believe it. She asked a mercenary whose soul was scared out. In front of him was a headless corpse, which was Ganmu, who was killed by Xiao Yi last night. "Yes, Captain. Yesterday we blocked Yan Cheng's niece onto a cliff." Second captain was about to have a big fight when suddenly a person rushed out and smashed his head. The person even said he was called the Dark Knight and was not afraid of our Wolf-Head Mercenary Corps. Is it a hero who saves the beauty? This fool, ask him to improve his usual image and not listen. Now he feels comfortable. Moose Snake gave a disdainful glance at the headless colored patch on the ground and said, "Let's pass it on and tell our brothers not to act rashly in the next few days. Let's go investigate and see what that person named Black Knight hero really is." At the same time, in the conference hall of the Blood Battle Mercenary Corps, Yan Qingjing sat in his seat with a serious expression on his face, flanked by elite members of the Mercenary Corps. Xiao Yi sat among them, but next to him sat a little girl who looked a bit silly. It was Ling Er whom he had saved from Ganmu's hand yesterday. "You girl, why do you insist on running over during our meeting?" Looking at Ling Er next to Xiao Yi, Yan Qing showed a speechless expression. However, Ling Er tilted her head and pouted, saying, "At least I brought him here. Can I hear what you say to him?" Line. Looking at his spoiled niece, Yan Qing shook his head helplessly and said, "All right, let's start the meeting." With a solemn expression, Yan Qing introduced the members of the group to Xiao Yi and said, "This is Ka Gang. You should have met him yesterday. He is a 5-star fighter, and this is Mulan. Like Ka Gang, he is a 5-star fighter, including Fei Lei, Qing Xian, Mo Shi, and Qing Yi. Except for Fei Lei, who is an 8-star fighter, everyone else is a 4-star fighter. Fei Lei has shrunk to become an 8-star fighter, no wonder the Wolf-Head Mercenary Corps dares to be so arrogant." Xiao Yi smiled and nodded to a few people, while Yan Qing introduced him to them again. "This is little brother Black Knight, eh? He is a handsome young man who can handle Moose Snake." Halfway through Yan Cheng's introduction, he suddenly paused. Xiao Yi immediately explained to him, and Yan Qing nodded and continued, "You know, the Wolf-Head Mercenary Corps is ambitious and has always wanted to annex our Blood Battle Mercenary Corps to become the largest force in Qingshan Town. Especially since we obtained the treasure at the foot of the cliff, they have been coming to trouble every day. A few days ago, they even injured several mercenaries in our regiment. It's really unbearable. Yes. I've been wanting to do those itchy guys for a long time." Upon hearing this, a middle-aged man of the same age as Yan Qing suddenly stood up and slapped the table. It was the 8-star fighter Fei Lei who was introduced earlier, and the other 2 men and women in the constellation nodded in agreement. Seeing everyone fighting against each other, Yan Qing immediately took advantage of the heat to build the railway and said, "Today, with the help of the Knight brothers, we should also go find them to settle the matter." As Yan Qing spoke, he began to plan the battle. Their Wolf-Head Mercenary Regiment can be so arrogant, but it's just because they have one more high-level fighter than our regiment. Now with the help of the Black Knight brothers to deal with the Moose Snake, I can free up my hands to deal with their second commander Ganmu. Brother Fei, you and their third commander Heming are both 8-star fighters. You just need to hold him down and I will help you after I solve Ganmu. Finally, we will work together to kill Moose Snake. Once Moose Snake dies, the others will no longer be threatened. Upon hearing Yan Cheng's arrangement, everyone expressed that there was no problem, but Xiao Yi said, Captain Yan, actually you don't need to worry about Ganmu anymore. What does this mean, little brother? Upon hearing this, everyone was taken aback. Xiao Yi glanced at Linger next to her, who looked like she would bite you if you dared to tell me about last night. She said calmly, when I came to Qingshan town last night, I passed by the Wolf Head Mercenary Corps. That Ganmu blocked me on the road and said he wanted to collect protection fees, so I killed him. Why did the old thug still pay for protection? Isn't he only interested in women? Fei Lei in the seat frowned uncontrollably, but Yan Qing said with a joyful expression, that's great. Let's just deal with Herman first and then deal with Moose Snake together. Captain Yan doesn't have to worry about Moose Snake's matter anymore. I can solve him alone. Xiao Yi waved his hand and said, the problem now is, there are at least hundreds of people in the enemy's mercenary group. How should we kill them?